video and put that up and says, isn't this scary? And it is very scary.
Well, it is very scary, and I find it very interesting that on the one hand, we are constantly lectured about the need to have ever-escalating safety on a variety of things. And yet here we have something that's demonstrably not just unsafe, but arguably reckless. And there's no hue and cry because, in my opinion, there's political pressure being applied to put these cars into circulation, whereas, if anything that involves us being able to control our cars, that's a different matter.
And that's a key point. You talk about that in your posting Along for the Ride at epautos.com. You talk about, let's talk first about autopilot and why this really is a misnomer.
Well, it's not autopilot. The car is not under your control, but it's under the control of someone. First and foremost, it's under the control of the people who designed the software and put the parameters into the computer that controls everything. And secondarily, it's under the control, potentially, of someone else in real time. People out there may not realize it, but every Tesla that's out in circulation transmits constantly to Tesla, the company, telemetry about your driving, about where you're headed, how fast you're going, and so on. All of these vehicles have that capability, and GM's OnStar system, for example, has that capability, and they can control your car remotely, and I really worry that potentially that is the long-term agenda with these things.
Absolutely, and they want to control not just your car, but they want to control you. When we talk about gun control, we're talking about people control. When we talk about some third party or the government controlling your movement, that ought to make all of us why would people accept that? And yet we see that people really are happy and totally ready for this. They took a poll in New York as well as California, said people are totally ready for autonomous cars. This is the automotive establishment pushing this. This one came from Road and Track, that headline. Said 9 out of 10 New Yorkers, 86% of residents in California think that autonomous cars are a great idea. And there's a picture, I think, of that guy who was asleep in this car.
That may be true for city people in New York and L.A., but I think they've also been sold a bill of goods. I think that they have been marketed a kind of Jetsons view of this future where they'll be whisked along at great efficiency to wherever they want to go. It's not going to be like that. If you think about how traffic laws are right now, and if you think about what government generally does when it controls mobility or controls our access to it, it tends not to be speedy or efficient.
That's right. And you made an excellent point, I think, when you were talking about autopilot and the difference between real autopilot and an airplane. You mentioned the Jetson view of the world. When you're in an airplane, as you pointed out, autopilot, you file your flight plan with them. They keep all other planes a huge distance away from you, not only front and back, but altitude-wise and that sort of thing. So there's a tremendous spatial bubble put around you to correct for any error. And yet you can't do cars that way. Cars are going to be in very close proximity in a real-world environment, and there's going to be a lot of unexpected things flying in there. They freak out about the idea that they've got drones in the air around airports. I mean, that's the analogy would be as if you got, a gazillion drones around the airport as their planes are trying to land. That would be a true analogy to what's going to happen with their self-driving cars.
Well, sure, but let's just, for the sake of discussion, say that it would be technologically feasible to do that. Would we want that?
Yes.
I write often about mobility and its relationship to freedom, and that means our ability to just jump in our car at the spur of the moment, take a trip someplace without filing a flight plan, without getting permission beforehand. I think there is no way that this could be implemented technologically without requiring that everybody basically file a flight plan, and with our movements being not only monitored, but completely controlled at all times.
Absolutely. We're going to see that just as we have seen the no-fly list, for example. You can put you on a no-fly list, put you on a watch list, and use that to apply punishments to you. You don't know that you're on the list. You don't know why you're on the list. You're not allowed to confront your accusers in a public and speedy trial. You're not allowed to call witnesses in your defense. They just put you on that list. Yep. Of course, they're going to do that with a car. They're going to apply that kind of punishment to people, and they're going to do it if they say that you owe them money, for example. You owe the IRS or you owe somebody else some money. They will essentially put you under house arrest. It'll be very easy when they control all transportation. You pointed out that once you turn over that control, you said for an automated car to be safe, it's necessary, it is mandatory that the caprice of human drivers be taken entirely out of the picture. Yep. So get ready. If you want to be safe, turn over all control of your movement to the government forever. Forever.
It has to be that way. It's an either-or situation, as these accidents have proved. Either the driver, the human driver, is responsible for maintaining control of the vehicle and being aware of the driving environment and so on, or he's not. You can't have it in the middle.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about some of the crony capitalist aspects of this, because as we see this being investigated, we've already seen some charges, questions brought up about Tesla's S models and their suspension problems, and we learned just the last couple of days that to fix these problems, they were demanding that the owners first sign a non-disclosure agreement, that they not talk about the fact that they're having a problem with this car. That is totally unprecedented in the automotive industry.
To my knowledge, yeah. I've never heard of anything like that happening. And more significantly and more interestingly, I think, the government apparently isn't too interested in that.
Yes, because...
meanwhile, they're crucifying Volkswagen over a literally fractional difference in tailpipe emissions for their diesel vehicles.
Absolutely, yeah. You had another interesting comment on that. It was called Bank Run, talking about how they're trying to put Volkswagen out of business. And now we've had the state of California jump in with $86 million, which is like petty change compared to what the federal government is trying to do to Volkswagen. Talk about that briefly.
Well, this, too, is unprecedented. I think the total liability, the number that's being bandied around now, is something on the order of $80 billion, not million, dollars total that will be involved here, not just in terms of the government's fines, but also potential litigation from class action lawsuits. And again, to put that into some kind of perspective, you might recall the Firestone Explorer rollover fiasco that happened back in the 90s.
That's right.
That cost Ford about $24 million. Or excuse me, that cost Ford $2.4 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And the prior exploding Pinto fiasco of the 70s, in which there actually were real victims, actually people who were hurt, that cost the equivalent in today's money of about $24 million.
Wow.
And nobody to date has produced a single actual flesh and blood victim, somebody who can say, hey, I was harmed by the fractionally increased emissions of these Volkswagen cars, which, by the way, would have been fully compliant with all the federal mandates that were in effect for, say, circa 2005 model year cars, and nobody's claiming that those cars hurt anybody either.
Well, here's another one for you, Eric. One of the first stories that I covered when I came here to InfoWars was the EPA hooking people up to diesel tailpipes at the University of North Carolina to try to show that they needed to have more stringent regulations on diesel fumes, on fine particulate matter. And so what they did was they went to Congress, and at the time the head of the EPA was Lisa Jackson, and she did a little dog and pony show that was prearranged with then Congressman Markey from Massachusetts. And he was actually leading her with questions and actually read some of her lines. That's how you know it was all coordinated ahead of time. And basically said, you're not talking about people getting sick here. You're talking about people actually dying from this. And she said, oh, yes, they will die from fine particulate matter. And very quickly, and it's more people dying from that than are dying from cancer. And then they took their own levels, and they exposed people to 72 times their maximum level. And they pre-screened to try to find people who had respiratory and heart issues so they could create an event. And now we've got the same people coming out and saying, we're going to shut down Volkswagen because they disobeyed our laws. And that's really the issue, isn't it? They disobeyed their laws. They
disobeyed their laws. I mean, it's the equivalent, this cheating, and I put it in air quotes, of the emissions test is analogous to you or I having a radar detector in our car to avoid the speed traps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize it, and I wish that Volkswagen had done a better job of explaining it. In fact, I wish the industry generally had done this, but all the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. The tailpipe exhaust emissions of any recent vintage car, whether it's a gas engine car or a diesel engine car, are effectively nil. 95% of what comes out of the tailpipe of a modern car is carbon dioxide and water vapor, both of which are inert gases that have nothing to do whatsoever with asthma or air quality issues. But they don't want to talk about that because then EPA would no longer have a reason to exist.
Yeah. Well, when we look at this, we can also, we can see what many people call the regulatory captures. You pointed out the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration doesn't really want to see anything wrong with these self-driving cars because it fits so well with the government's agenda, and I look at the regular mainstream automotive press, like Car and Driver pushing this stuff, and I'm wondering, who are they going to be selling magazines to? Are they going to have like a Bus and Rider magazine in the future?
I wonder what happened to those guys. When I was a kid, I grew up reading guys like Brock Yates, who you probably know about.
Oh, yeah.
guys who not only loved cars and loved mobility, but were car guys and who understood mechanical things and engineering things.
Yeah.
And the people that they've got covering the industry today are nothing like that, except for myself
Yeah,
and
exactly.
maybe a couple of other people who have kind of become outliers off the reservation.
Yeah, I remember the motto he had, cogito ergo sum.
Yeah.
I wish that would fit on a license plate. Let's talk about the regulatory capture, though, with Tesla. Because one of the things I was really surprised when I went back and looked at this was the timeline. This fatal accident that we just recently had of the guy who now they're saying, no, we don't think he even had autopilot on after this has been going for about 10 days. This happened back on May 4th. And it was 54 days before the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration publicly disclosed those details. In the meantime, you had massive stock movements to the favor of Tesla. You had Goldman Sachs upgrading them to a buy. You had Tesla buying back its stock and making a $1.5 billion profit after they cashed that in so that they could then move on and try to take over Solar City, which is about $2.8 billion. So you've got all these moves that are happening. They know about it. The NTHSA knows about it, but the public doesn't know about it in that time. I think that's pretty telling.
Well, it is, and it's the media's fault for not publicizing that, and it's an open question as to why they don't. It seems that they take at face value every pronouncement that Musk makes is not examined critically and is simply transmitted to the public, whether by print or other forms of media. And it's ridiculous. The company, Musk does not sell cars. He sells carbon credits, which is an elaborate flapdoodle. It's a means by which to mulct the major car companies that do sell functionally viable and economically practical vehicles. In states like California and some other states, there are requirements that every automaker that does business in the state sell a certain percentage of so-called zero-emissions cars. Well, since only electric cars qualify for that, if you, as a car company, do not sell electric cars or do not sell a certain number of electric cars, then you got to buy the carbon credit from somebody like Elon Musk. That's how the guy makes his money.
Exactly. Even though his cars are incredibly expensive, and even though he just had a press conference not too long ago where he said, yeah, their first generation of cars, the Tesla Roadster, was total garbage and unsafe. That was his characterization of it.
Well, to me, it's literally lunatic asylum crazy. They tout these cars for their performance and their advanced technology and their sexiness. Well, you could say the same thing about a Porsche or a Lamborghini. So why aren't we paying people to buy Porsches? Is it not the same thing?
Yeah. Well, it's all about control. And the government is allied with them tooth and nail because they have always wanted to have control of our transportation. And it's not just the government and these car companies. Of course, it's also Uber. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Eric Peters. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Eric Peters of EPAutos.com about the future of transportation, the future of freedom, quite frankly. Because if you don't have control over your movement, okay, you're essentially locked up. You're under house arrest. And that's what we're moving towards. We've always had the government want to control our transportation. And now they have the perfect vehicle, if you will, for it, the so-called self-driving car. We've been talking to Eric about the recent spate of Tesla crashes, but even before these last three crashes that have been blamed on autopilot, the one where the former Navy SEAL was killed as his car passed under a semi-trailer, 18-wheel truck from the side. We also had before that, we had multiple cases where people were reporting that autopilot not only did not do collision avoidance, but it sped up as it saw the situation developing. And so we have a different approach that's being taken by Tesla to put people out there in a beta test, putting them out there on the road, and they have complete protection from the federal government and its regulatory agencies. They're trying to override any concerns at the state level about the safety of these systems. A different approach is being taken by Google, who say they want to take complete control of your car, no steering wheel, no brakes. That's the only safe way to do that. And, of course, that's what they're eventually going to do because that's what the government wants to do. Before we go back to Eric, real quickly, I want to let you know that we have our Independence Day mega sale ends tonight, and that is the massive discount off of multiple items. We've got 20% off Survival Shield X2, which is about to sell out. We've got 20% off Alexa Pure Air purifiers, as well as 20% off Alexa Pure water filters. And we have 20 to 40% off InfoWars Select storable food. All of that is going to be ending tonight. Also, we have a new product, 25% off Go Smile Sonic Pro teeth whitening toothbrush.